Happy Friday. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day, good 2022. This is A Marvelous coming back with another video. I want to thank everybody for tuning in because time and attention are two things that you can't get back. So tuning in to me in this video is greatly appreciated. And I want to say thank you to all those that subscribe, all those that comment. Your comments and subscriptions actually help me in general to create more content and push the envelope like what's needed. So thank you for that. Please hit the subscribe button because I got some things for all you subscribers out there over time. So with that, this video is going to cover why is there national coverage of cops killing blacks primarily during the summertime. And to analyze that, I'm going to go over something called the Kerner Commission or the Kerner Report, and also go over which of these things are real, because just because you see it in the media and the news doesn't mean that it's a real event. And by real, I mean you can have people that actually die, but they can actually die from a scenario that was created in advance by trained killers, by the government, or real meaning that it didn't even take place at all, or it was just a bunch of crisis actors, right? I know you're not supposed to say that. Crisis actors on YouTube, but I said it. So with that, I'm going to start with going over what the Kerner Commission was. And this is pretty much what I'm going to be breaking down right here. This is called the Kerner Report, the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. Now, I suggest anybody that's remotely interested in race relations in America to get a copy of this, no matter how you get it, and just read it. Because this right here is probably one of the most, if not the most comprehensive breakdowns and analysis of racism in America. This right here covers by admission the U.S. government clearly admitting and outlining in full detail in research and investigation that white racism is the number one reason why blacks in America are held back, and why it's a number one cause of their frustration and actually what causes them to riot. So this Kerner report actually came about from the riots in the 60s, and they wanted to understand why blacks in America were rioting so much. And in this report, they actually said rioting is not an appropriate term. They actually said the more appropriate term is rebellions. So whenever you see blacks in the street because of social injustice, don't call them riots, they're rebellions. That's from the U.S. government. So from here, I'm going to show how some of these things are staged, which means manufactured, because most people don't believe these things in the news are staged. I'm going to show your U.S. government in writing, show you how they have staged these events and how that's still going on today. So with that, I'm going to give some context to what the Kerner Report is, and then go into the meat of the video. Okay, so here's a little backdrop to why they had to form a whole commission to analyze the behavior of blacks rebelling, or what they call rioting, in the 60s. The Kerner Commission report is a fundamental document of the American 1960s. In August 1965, only 5 days after President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the historic Voting Rights Act, a violent incident involving white police and local residents in the black neighborhood of Watts, Los Angeles, touched off 5 days of rioting that left 34 dead, 1,000 injured, and $40 million in property damage. Thereafter, clashes between police and black citizens ignited explosions in cities around the country. 11 major riots in the summer of 1966, and 25 major riots a year later, including the decade's worst in Detroit, which left 43 dead. What had become, earlier in the decade, a remarkable liberal political consensus on racial injustice racial justice shattered. Whereas in 1964, a majority of Northern whites supported President Johnson's ambitious civil rights program. By 1966, a majority believed the government was pushing too hard for racial integration. Groping for some political leverage with Michigan National Guardsmen still deployed in the streets of Detroit, Johnson announced to the nation on July 27, 1967, the formation by executive order of the National Advisory Commission of Civil Disorders to be chaired by former Illinois Governor Otto Kerner. So that, in essence, is what sparked them to come up with this commission and the environment behind it. So there were so many riots and blacks was tearing this country down so much through the anger and frustration that they came up with a commission to analyze everything involved as to the cause and what led up to all of these riots. So that's the foundation. So when I say that a lot of these things that you see fast forward and now being not real or possibly staged is because 2021 they had 200 killings of blacks by police. And yet I can't even name 1 to 3 major ones that was covered nationally on television. Typically, right, you have legendary ones like Mike Brown. You have Eric Garner, which I personally can attest to because I grew up with his wife. You have Trayvon Martin, right? So you have these definitive incidences of blacks getting killed by cops. But there's 200 last year, and yet I can't think of one. I can't think of any that made national headlines. So that's red flag number 1. Red flag number 2, if you look at those 200 blacks that got killed by cops in 2021, you will see that a majority of those incidences happened not in the summertime. It happened in the winter or the fall. In fact, if you go in order, you'll see that it's in the wintertime, right? So why didn't they show these nationally last year? Why? And that's suspicious to me. So I propose that maybe not all of them, but the majority or a good number of the nationally headlined killings of blacks by police that you see plastered all over the television and social media is because some of these are not organic. Some of these are staged. Some of these are government sanctioned and orchestrated in order to create racial tensions in this country for various reasons. Now I'm going to go over the history of why I say this from the government's own words. And why this happens in the summertime. Why summertime is crucial for giving you race narratives and giving you all type of bombardments of blacks getting abused by police in the summertime, which you don't see in the winter. You don't see in the cold months. You very rarely see it at all. So why is it the summertime? What is it with blacks, summertime, and police and race narratives that has to be done in the summer? And why I say these things is orchestrated. So, in this report, there's a section called Patterns of Disorder, in which they analyze the patterns as to why blacks were causing disruption during these time in the 60s. And here's what it says. This is Patterns of Disorder. Distribution in terms of time, area, size of community. So they broke down in detail these riots based on time, area, and size, and a number of other factors. I mean, they went in with the detail. It says in 1967, disorders occurred with increasing frequency as summer approached and tapered off as it waned. More than 60% of the 164 disorders occurred in July alone. And the next videos I'm going to do is going to show the significance of July and why things happen. So most of these things happen in the summertime. And it is said that black people congregate mostly in the summer. People in general congregate mostly in the summer. But black people, being children of the sun, the summertime is when blacks are out mostly, whether it's barbecues, whether it's parks, whether it's just on their block, because just being on the block is inexpensive entertainment, right? You don't have to pay anything to be on the block. You don't have to pay anything to sit on the stoop. And blacks congregate a lot in the summertime just in their neighborhood. Let me continue reading just to give more context to what I'm saying. Okay, the final incident. Okay, this is development of violence. Once the series of precipitating incidents culminated in violence, the riot process did not follow a uniform pattern in the 24 disorders surveyed. However, some similarities emerge. The final incident before the outbreak of disorder and the initial violence itself generally occurred at a time in which it was normal for many people to be on the streets. In most of the 24 disorders, groups generally estimated at 50 or more persons were on the street at the time and place of the first outbreak. In all 24 disturbances, including the 3 university-related disorders, the initial disturbance area consisted of streets with relatively high concentrations of pedestrian and automobile traffic at the time. In all but 2 cases, Detroit and Milwaukee, violence started between 7 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., when the largest number of pedestrians could be expected. 10 of the 24 disorders erupted on Friday night, Saturday, or Sunday. In most instances, the temperature during the day on which violence first erupted was quite high. This contributed to the size of the crowds on the street, particularly in areas of congested housing. So, hot months. This is when black people congregate. So, this is what I'm saying. Whenever things happen in this country, whenever you have an organic uprising, or whenever you have a group of people that challenge the government, what happens is, if they're not successful in their aim, in their mission, this government studies that incident, right? So in this example, all of these riots, clearly the objective wasn't attained because the conditions didn't change, and blacks still went back to their neighborhoods under the same circumstances. Even though there was some damage done and there was a loud message sent, it wasn't a complete overthrow of the government. It wasn't a complete change in America's system. When this happens, whenever you have incidences that happen from a group of people, doesn't matter which group of people, if they're not successful in their aims, what the government does is they analyze those incidences, like they did in this, with commissions, with hearings and things like that, reports. Whenever the government does this, they now have a blueprint for something that took place. And the government, through its many agencies and their think tanks and their various meetings, they take all of these things that happen, that they've analyzed and researched, and they take it to another level, and they find out how to use it for various purposes. One of those purposes might be to weaponize it. From these riots in the 60s, it is quite possible, and this is my assertion, that the government has found a way to take the concept of a rebellion and riot and make it in the form of a weapon, make it in the form of psychological warfare, and make it in the form where they can use this history and manipulate it over time to control an outcome. And that's what this country does. They take past events, study it, and then when they study it, they find different ways to use the past for the future. So what do I mean by that? So because they analyze this so much with blacks and racial tension and white racism, they have a way in which they can, from scratch, orchestrate an incident, a racial incident, and make it seem as if it's real. And because they have so much information and history of blacks rioting, this isn't something that's difficult. You can take You could have people on the payroll. You can set them up in a given territory, a territory normally that can be controlled, where you don't have too many people that can figure out that it's orchestrated. And then you set up the scenario, an artificial scenario, in which it appears to be a naturally occurring racial incident. And then when this happens, you have the right media there, you have the right people in place to set this incident off. And then when the alleged incident takes place, you broadcast it and you televise it. This is why when you see a lot of these incidences, they never show you the incident from A to Z. They always show you reoccurring clips. Anytime you see like a mass shooting, or in these cases, cops killing blacks, one red flag is that they never show you the whole thing from A to Z. Take George Floyd, for example. The George Floyd incident, they said he went into a store and he gave a counterfeit bill. I still haven't seen a video with this counterfeit bill. And what they also do is that they release footage months later or a year later or way later to say, oh, new footage has been released. But they never show you A to Z what happened. They only show you key footage that will racially charge the viewer in order for them to get a reaction. And I'm saying they have that capability because of what went down in the 60s and all of the things that they analyzed in the Kerner Report. Because they have enough data, they have enough analyzing to create something that was organic into something that's artificial, similar to reality TV. That's all reality TV is. If you put people in situations, real people in situations, and you put little things in this environment to trigger various people based on their personality, and then these people will have tension amongst each other based upon things that's given to them for them to be angry about, as opposed to things that they would naturally be angry about just by living in the same environment. So this reality television is no different than being able to create an event like a mass shooting or an alleged cop killing a black person by creating a false environment, creating false tensions, and then creating false scenarios with real people, and then broadcasting this incident as if it's real. This is what's going on. So this right here, I'm going to give an example by their own words where it says that they've actually had incidences during this time in the 60s where events were staged, where they weren't organic. So this isn't just me making it up. You have the U.S. government in their own words analyzing how there were instances in which they staged events that was not the case. And I'm going to read that now just for more context. This right here is a gem. You probably will not get another report which analyzes racism the way this report does. And it's good blueprint to see how the response after this can easily be controlled and neutralized because they already went through this so many times. It's a blueprint. Once this country makes a blueprint of something, then they can remix it any way they want to make it appear as if it's real. And that's what's going on now. We are living in a artificially simulated reality where there's different forms of reality. You have things that could be unreal, real, real, unreal. It might appear real, but the scenario isn't real. The scenario isn't real, but the people acting out the scenario are not. They're paid, right? It's kind of like a movie. You have real people acting out scripts, but they're taking this to a next level with these national events that we're looking at, thinking that it's organic and something that happened naturally. Okay. So, what I'm going to read now is actual examples in the 60s where it shows that they staged some of these events. This right here is under chapter 15, the section, the news and the disorders, okay? second. Okay. Coverage of the 1967 disturbances. We have found a significant imbalance between what actually happened in our cities and what the newspaper, radio, and television coverage of the riots told us happened. The Commission, in studying last summer's disturbances, visited many of the cities and interviewed participants and observers. We found that the disorders, as serious as they were less destructive, less widespread, and less of a black-white confrontation than most people believed. Lacking other sources of information, we informed our original impressions and belief from what we saw on television, heard on the radio, and read in newspapers and magazines. We are deeply concerned that millions of other Americans who must rely on the mass media likewise formed incorrect impressions and judgments about what went on in many American cities last summer. Here we go. First, despite the overall statistical picture, there were instances of gross flaws in presenting news of the 1967 riots. Some newspapers printed scare headlines unsupported by the mild stories that followed. All media reported rumors that had no basis in fact. Some newsmen staged riots even for the cameras. Examples are included in the next section. So let me read that again. Some newsmen staged, and it says staged. I don't know if you can see it. You see it? Some newsmen, because when I say staged, I got friends and people close to me, people that I talk to that say this is far-fetched. There's no stage. These people actually died. This stuff is real. So I'm reading to you in the government report where it says some of these incidences way back in the 60s were staged. So if you're talking about 50 plus years ago where they didn't have these smartphones, they didn't have the type of technology and chicanery and wizardry that we have now with information and tools, and they were staging events back then, what makes you think now that they can't do it? Especially when you have websites called this person does not exist. There's websites out there where they have people that look real and they don't exist. That's what we have now. So if this is the technology that we have now, what makes people think that they can't stage and artificially manufacture these events to appear as if they're naturally occurring, if we're seeing clearly in the 1960s, this is something that they was doing by government's own admission. Evidence, okay? This isn't just me making up a conspiracy theory, and this is why I'm reading it. Second, the press obtained much factual information about the scale of the disorders, property damage, personal injury, and deaths from local officials who often were inexperienced in dealing with civil disorders and not always able to sort out fact from rumor in the confusion. At the height of the Detroit riot, some news reports of property damage put the figure in excess of $500 million. Subsequent investigation shows it to be 40 to 45 million. The initial estimates were not the independent judgment of the reporters or editors. They came from the beleaguered government officials, but the news media gave currency to these errors. So here you had the media reporting $500 million in damage when really it was $40 million. Okay? Let me give some more examples. Of these things being staged. Now, this is the 60s, okay? Way before this technology. In particular, we believe newsmen should be wary of how they play rumors of impending trouble. Whether a rumor is reliable and significant enough to deserve coverage is an editorial decision. But the failure of many headline rumors to be borne out last summer suggests that these editorial decisions often are not as carefully made as the sensitivity of the subject requires. In Detroit, a radio station broadcast a rumor based on a telephone tip that Negroes planned to invade suburbia one night later. If plans existed, they never materialized. In Cincinnati, several outlets ran a story about white youths running for possessing a bazooka. Only a few reports mentioned that the weapon was inoperable. In Tampa, A newspaper repeatedly indulged in speculation about impending trouble. When the state attorney ruled the fatal shooting of a Negro youth justifiable homicide, the paper's news columns reported there were fears today that the ruling would stir new race problems for Tampa tonight. The day before, the paper quoted one top lawman as telling reporters he now fears that Negro residents in Central Avenue Project and in the West Tampa trouble spots feel they're on competition and are trying to see which can cause the most unrest, which area can become center of attraction. A West Coast newspaper put out an edition headline, "Rioting Erupts in Washington, D.C. Negroes hurl bottles, rocks at police near White House." The story did not support the headline. I'll read that again. The story did not support the headline. It reported what was actually the fact, that a number of teenage Negroes broke store windows and threw bottles and stones at police and firemen near downtown Washington, a mile or more from the White House. On the other hand, the same paper did not report unfounded local rumors of sniping when the other news media did. So, in summation, what you see now, whenever you see nationally televised killings of black people, it will overwhelmingly be in the summer. I guarantee it. You will not see more incidences across nationwide media, whether it's social media, television, radio, newspapers. You will not see this outside the summer months, period. You might get a one-off or two-off, but most of these stories will come in the summertime because this report found that blacks congregate mostly in the summer. So being that they know that, they understand that the summertime, and I'm going to cover this in my other videos when I talk about the Sirius constellation, the origin of black people, and America's history with July 4th and July in general. Okay, July and summertime is a very spiritual, it's a very emotionally charged time based upon what goes down in July with the constellations and America's secret destiny with the constellations and black people's origin from the constellation and America and black people's hidden history with the stars, which occurs in the summertime at a high point in July. I'm going to cover all of that too. So there's no accident that July is very significant, which is why if you look what happened this year, you'll see that there's been a lot of rapid fire events that happened in July. Okay? That's no accident. These things are not natural. These things occur because of what's going on in the constellations, and this government understands that, so they take this knowledge and they execute these events according to the right time and the right numbers. I'm going to go over that in another video. But in summation, these events, critically analyze these events to see if they're organic. If you see on national TV cops killing blacks, which you'll mostly see in the summertime, ask yourself, where's the entire footage? Show me the footage. Don't tell me that it's too violent, because they show violence all day long. If I wanted to get beat in the head about Asian hate crimes, they had no problem showing people getting stabbed up and beat down. So I want to see if this is organic. I don't want to see a still image. I don't want to see the same loop over and over again. I want to see from A to Z how this happened. That's one. Second, if they show you clips months later, okay, months later, another red flag. Three, if you cannot see open caskets with these people that supposedly died, okay, and if that's sketchy, just critically think, because it doesn't make sense. Like I said, in 2021, you had 200 killings of black people by cops, and yet I can't name or remember, and I challenge any of you watching this to put it in the comment section to name me the national headlines that was big in 2021 of blacks getting killed. 4, how is it that all of these blacks got killed by cops, yet most of them is in the wintertime, yet the ones that we see mostly is in the summertime? Why is that? Why don't they show overwhelming amount of mass shootings in the cold months which is when they take place, but they beat us in the head with these killings in the summertime months. These are red flags, and this is the foundation backed by this report as to why I say all of these killings are not organic. Do blacks get killed by cops? Yes. White people get killed by cops. There's about 1,055 killings by cops in 2022, between the beginning of this year until July 15th, 2022. Yet, how many do we see on the news? Why do some make it and not others? Why is that? Just like mass shootings, right? We're at 300 mass shootings pretty much for the year, and yet we only see a few. And it seems like the ones that we see already have a narrative that's spun. But if you was to look at these mass shootings, you will see that they don't have a big narrative to it. They look and sound, when you read them and look at them, real organic. But the ones that we see seem real suspicious. Real suspicious. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I wanted to do this video. Be wary of these cops killing blacks in the summertime. These are weaponized, analyzed, orchestrated events that's based upon research done in the 60s when these things were organic. So critically think, analyze each of these to see which is real and which is not. So therefore, you don't fall for the emotionalism of having to be racially charged to go out and fight and be angry at other races when it's not warranted. So with that, thank you for your attention. I hope you got something out of this video, and I wish all of you prosperity. Please subscribe to the channel. Peace.